It's time for the Rick Smith Show. Now, here is the voice of the working class, Rick Smith.
And welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks so much for being here today on the big program. Lots to get to, lots to talk about. You may remember back in December, U.S. Steel agreed to be bought out by Japanese steelmaker Nippon Steel. They are Japan's largest steelmaker for $14.1 billion. And you had members of the Pennsylvania congressional delegation saying, no, we should be blocking this. This is a bad idea. People like me saying this is a terrible idea. Understand, U.S. Steel, once the largest company basically on the planet. Now, they've been in decline for years, and now you have this formerly iconic 122-year-old company, one of the nation's first major conglomerates, a symbol of American might and productivity, product power, being sold off to the highest foreign bidder. And I would argue for not very much. On January 3rd, you had 53 members of Congress who sent a letter to the Biden administration asking for a comprehensive review in the hopes of blocking the sale. And for me, the interesting part of all of this, and we'll see how politically this pans out, but the arguments for allowing the sale have been interesting to watch, because you've got, on one side, you've got, anyone who's against it, this is just xenophobia because the Japanese are our friends. And you go, yeah, now. Clearly, they're our friends, and that's great. Now, on the other side, you have some who have said, it's just business. Capitalism kills off the weak, and, we consumers will be so much better off because, this U.S. Steel, they didn't invest in their business. They ran their business poorly, and now they're ripe for the picking. And look, the first argument, nonsense. I'm not buying it at all. But the second got me thinking, is this the sign of an America in decline? Is this the sign of, 50, 70 years of American excess? I mean, I remember, the heyday, the end of the heyday of American steel, the jobs, really, the standard of living that came out of those jobs. And I think back to, someone who I knew very well, who her father was a supervisor at Bethlehem Steel. The standard of living that they had, and the stories that he told of, Bethlehem Steel in its heyday employed like 100,000 people at good, solid, family-sustaining wages, with health care, with retirement security, with vacations, and all kinds of stuff. A wonderful standard of living, opportunity for children to go on to college like this person was able to do, and that all got eviscerated. And to hear this guy, this retiree, tell the stories, the management back then, and this is 60s, 70s, made horrible decisions, bad policy, our horrible trade policies, supply side voodoo Reaganomics, neoliberal trade policies, all bad. But, investing in, buying hotels and investing in everything but steelmaking capacity, eventually cost them. And I remember this guy, he was the head of the coke plant at the time. Their job was to pour the steel. And he said, look, they were bringing the Japanese engineers through to show them how they made steel. This is back in the 70s. And then, after World War II, we're outfitting them with the best capacity. Part of the Marshall Plan was to rebuild, Japan and Europe and these places that are now, buying us. And I go back to this and I go, this is the result of bad policy by these companies, terrible, terrible board leadership, terrible CEO leadership, but also, and I would argue more importantly, bad political policy, bad tax policy that would go, go ahead and take those profits. Don't bother plowing them back into your business. Pay your CEOs more, buy hotels, buy whatever. but don't worry about your core business. To me, steel's special. We need steel. Well, we need it when we need it, or actually, we don't need it until we need it. And I remember my grandfather telling me, look, the reason we won World War II is we were able to ramp up production. We had steel mills. We had factories. We don't have those buildings anymore. We had the buildings. And look, understand, steel production is crucial for a nation. So for me, when I look at a foreign company taking over our steel production and the possibility of them either taking it or dumping in and causing other competitors to go out of business, that's a major problem. Understand, steel is a big deal, for our infrastructure to start with. It's a fundamental building material for our roads, our bridges, our railways, buildings, whatever you need. It's the backbone of industrial development for factories and warehouses and manufacturing. It's all of that stuff. If, let's say, something bad were to happen and we did need to ramp up production, if you don't have the factories, you don't have the steel to build you got problems. Also, it's key to economic development. It means jobs. It means innovation. It means growth in industries like construction, automotive, manufacturing. If you're not making steel, if you don't have the capacity to make steel, all of the other stuff, kind of difficult. National security, anybody thought of that? Our warships, our planes, our guns, all of the things that we need for national defense. And just the arsenal of democracy, the fact that you have the capacity to ramp up and build without relying on another country. The fact that we can make technological advancements, innovate. We can ramp up environmental efficiencies. There's so much we can do if we invest in manufacturing and steel production. But yet, here, you've got some who are like, no, we're ready to give it up to the Japanese because they're already doing it. And that's the most troubling argument of all. The reason that Nippon is the right person instead of Cleveland Cliffs, who had made an offer, is, well, they're so much more advanced. I don't know if that's the right argument. I think it's a bad idea, and I'm interested to see how the Biden administration is going to move on this. But when we come back, Pennsylvania Congressman Chris Deluzio is going to be here to share some thoughts on why he opposes the idea and what he thinks possibly could come out of this. Quick break. Right back with Representative Deluzio.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania to the auto factories of Michigan to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, President of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
So as we've been talking about, on January 3rd, a number of congressional representatives sent a letter to the president saying, hey, you need to look at this acquisition of U.S. steel by a foreign competitor. In fact, 53 congressional representatives sent this letter led by the Congressional Labor Caucus saying, you know what, maybe something we should be taking a look at. In fact, one of the people who's been ahead of this, Pennsylvania Representative Chris Deluzio, who back in December, along with Bob Casey and John Fetterman, sent a letter to Janet Yellen saying, hey, maybe look at this. Maybe we should be blocking this. That's why I've asked the representative to come keep us up to date and maybe find out what's going on. Chris, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, Rick, thanks for having me on. Thanks for talking about what's happening, not just in Western PA, but all over the country with steel.
This is a big deal because I think, foreign ownership of productive capacity, which has been going on for decades, we've lost our manufacturing prowess. We used to be the nation, the world's producer, and now we're no longer that. In fact, there's a bridge in Trenton, New Jersey that says Trenton makes, the world takes. We're no longer that country because we've sold off our productive capacity. We didn't lose it. We sold it off. And this is another one of those moments where I think we better be very careful, especially when you're talking about steel. So where are we in this moment now that you guys have sent this letter to the administration? How have they responded?
Well, let me just start with, we should be the country and can be the country that makes the things that we rely on here at home and that we can export to the world. I talk about my region as a place where people made the steel that built America. We still make steel, okay? I think that's an important part of this and where we come from. So where are we is the good question. So you talked about the letters that my Labor Caucus colleagues and I sent, my senators and a bunch of others. The process here is for this committee called CFIUS, Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States. That's the avenue we're pushing for the administration to scrutinize the acquisition by Japan's Nippon Steel of U.S. Steel. And that committee has the power to look at the national security implications. And if they find that they're real, which I think they are, they have the power to block a transaction like this. And that's exactly what we and so many others who have signed on to these letters have asked the administration to do.
How often does this happen? I mean, there are a lot of instances throughout the years that I can recall Chinese companies buying up American manufacturers. In fact, some that you would argue had direct inputs into our military, and those weren't blocked. What are the chances of this, which is a big deal, a $14.1 billion deal? What are the chances of this being blocked?
I don't want to handicap this thing because I don't know exactly how this could play out. But what I will say is I think for way too long, talking decades, this country has not taken seriously enough our own domestic manufacturing, our own industrial base, our defense industrial base. You talk about consolidation in industries. Well, look at defense. I mean, we've seen the prime contractors there go down 90% since the 90s. You've got oftentimes parts and components and weapon systems with just a couple or a few companies submitting bids. That's a problem for our national security, as it is to see more and more manufacturing capacity go overseas or to foreign ownership. And that takes us right back to steel, which is something we rely on for defense. We need it for our infrastructure and so much else. And to see foreign control, that's an obvious foreign or obvious national security concern for me, even if it's a friendly country like Japan. Patriotism and commitment to this country has to mean something. And certainly when we're talking about something as important as steel that we rely on for our defense and so much else.
What do you say to the first response to those who were in favor of this? In fact, I saw, well, it's all xenophobia. If you're against this, it's xenophobia. So a response to that?
Look, let's start with the buyer here, Nippon Steel. This is a company who's been found to engage in illegal trade practices around steel, dumping steel into this country against our trade laws. And I think most Americans understand that our defense industrial base and many other sectors of our economy require us to make some things here at home. And steel is central to building so much. Certainly there's a defense piece of that, our infrastructure, you name it. And you think about a company like U.S. Steel. They've benefited tremendously from the Inflation Reduction Act. They've benefited tremendously from the infrastructure law and its spending. They've benefited from the tariffs from President Biden and President Trump. This country has given a lot, and not just this country, a lot of the people who I represent who toiled for generations, working hard, fighting for rights on the job in a union. The steelworkers are giving a lot to U.S. Steel, giving a lot to this country, and something has to matter more than just chasing the absolute maximum profit. Shareholders matter. They aren't the only thing. Workers matter, communities matter, and this country matters. I think that we've just seen this crazy shareholder profit maximization thing take over. And you've even got the Business Roundtable now, hardly some progressive group saying, hey, stakeholders other than shareholders also got skin in the game and also matter in all this.
Yeah, but Chris, that was pre-pandemic. That was so ancient ago. That was 2019. Back when they claimed they learned their lesson. I don't buy that anymore. They showed us their true colors. But here's the thing. One of the arguments that's being made to allow this to go forward, and this is the most troubling part of this for me, is that Nippon is so much more advanced. Their technology is better. They make better steel. It's going to raise the production levels. It's going to give the United States better steel. We're going to get cheaper steel. It's going to be all of the arguments that the privatizers have made for everything that we sell off, that we're going to get it better, faster, cheaper, all of that, those sales tactics. But the scary part is they're not entirely wrong that we have fallen behind in a lot of technology in these areas and in our productive capacities because we haven't had an industrial policy, I would argue, until this administration.
And that has been one of, I think, the sea changes to see an administration and a Congress, the last Congress, embrace industrial policy. People used to be afraid of that. Well, you know what? We need to make stuff and support our industries to compete globally. I think that's a basic idea that most of the American people agree with me about, and frankly agree with President Biden about. You saw it with the Inflation Reduction Act, CHIPS and Science Act, and of course, the infrastructure law on its own. We're doing some of this, and we should. And it also goes to global competition. It's one thing to say we can compete fairly with whatever country or company there is. It's another to expect us to say, hey, we have fair trade when the other side of that trading bargain is a country that dumps, that subsidizes, that exploits their workers, that has no environmental rules. That's not fair trade, and that's often what, for decades, folks in Washington outsourced our manufacturing prowess to, letting companies chase the cheapest labor and the weakest environmental rules they could.
I've been saying for virtually every day of doing this program for the last almost 19 years that I'm a firm believer in domestic production for domestic consumption. We make what we need. We trade for the things that we cannot make. And I don't believe there's anything that we can't make. And going forward in that ideology and that belief structure, and I think the administration with their thought process of reshoring some manufacturing and the way that we're about to start rebuilding our infrastructure, that could create millions of good-paying union jobs, could have a massive reverberation across our economy and recreate that prosperous working class that our grandparents' generation had. For me, that's moving the economy in a good direction, in the right direction, and redirecting our economy away from what got us into the mess that we've been struggling under for the last 30, 40 years. And I know there's some growing pains that are going to happen, but I think it's putting us in the right direction. So I think that we need to maintain our domestic capacity and not keep selling off our soul bit by bit.
Yeah, and Rick, look, we can go look at what happened when in the decades and years that followed the decisions to do what you just described, right? To offshore all these jobs, to crush good, solid manufacturing union jobs, to let Wall Street push companies to chase the cheapest labor and weakest environmental rules. What happened? You gutted tons of communities, many of which are in places like Western Pennsylvania. Folks saw rising inequality, less power and say on the job, slower growth, weaker purchasing power. It didn't work. Well, it worked if the idea was to maximize profits and make the people who own these companies increasingly richer. It did not strengthen our economy. It made growth worse, and it hurt workers and communities.
Yeah.
By the way, the workers in the communities who sacrificed a lot to build this country. So we're turning the ship around, and we should. And I'm going to keep pushing any administration to do exactly that. It's the right thing.
No, this is where, again, I'm a big supporter of the Biden administration because I do think that they are turning the ship. That they are moving us away from the neoliberal policies that got us into the mess that we're in. And I would, and away from the supply side voodoo Reaganomic policies that got us where we are. And I say part of what we need to start doing is stopping these buying up of our productive capacities, and also using our antitrust laws and updating our antitrust laws to start breaking up some of the monopolies that we already have and not letting new ones. We need to be bringing competition back to our economy and creating an environment where we can, we produce our own stuff and we have an economy that works for Americans.
Yeah, look, I think you're right to bring in the antitrust piece of this. Competition, I think, is a fundamentally American idea, right? We all know that. Small businesses get squeezed every day by whether it's Amazon or whoever else is a massive monopolist and player. And that consolidation, whatever industry it is, you see it, you look. there's more power to set prices and rip people off and price gouge. And I'll give a nod to my senior senator, Bob Casey, who's been digging in on a lot of this, what he's calling greedflation and otherwise, of where there is more power, where there's consolidation. These folks are passing on price increases to all of us because they can. Many of them brag about it on earnings calls with Wall Street, about their ability to pass on price increases beyond inflation or beyond the increases in the cost they're seeing. It is a policy choice, and it's one I disagree with. And I'm glad to see some interest all of a sudden in antitrust and taking on these powerful companies to frankly give more competition in there.
Yeah, it's something that I've been screaming for. I don't know, for all 18 years, because you can't have the kind of outweighted power. The pendulum cannot swing too far to one side or the other. I don't want labor to have all the power. I don't want to have corporations have all the power. I want to find that sweet spot where we all do better when we all do better.
Yeah. Well, and look, it's not just that it hurts consumers. It's not just that it hurts workers. It's not just that it hurts suppliers or competitors or small businesses. It's that it hurts all of them, right? When you have some firm or company that's got this kind of power, they hurt every single piece of the economy they deal with. And so that competition is important, and it really, helps workers, consumers, and everybody else who's involved.
Last question on this that I've got for you, because they've tried to minimize the national security component of U.S. Steel being bought up by Nippon. I've seen a number, about 3% of what U.S. Steel does is in the national security world. Are you concerned that that's the argument out there? Well, it's not a big deal. It's only 3% of what they do. Are you concerned about that kind of an argument?
I think it misses the basic thing. Go look at what domestic defense production was in, say, 1939 and compare it to 1943, right? We need to have the capacity to ramp up, God forbid, should we find ourselves in a big war. And seeing foreign ownership in a place where we will absolutely need to ramp up if, again, God forbid, we find ourselves in a big war, that's the problem.
Yeah.
And that's ignoring all the other implications of this sale. The point is, you got to have control here at home if we're in a situation where we have to rapidly expand our factories and our production.
No, you're spot on accurate there. And not worrying about overseas, worrying about right here at home. Obviously, January 6th, just a couple of days ago. I want to get your thoughts on the third anniversary, and more importantly, the historical rewrite that's going on right in front of us. That it was kind of a patriotic day. That it was a day like any other. People defecating on the floor and urinating on desks and smashing windows and wiping blood all over busts and all that stuff. I want to get your thoughts.
Yeah, last I checked, it's not patriotic to beat the crap out of cops in your quest to disrupt the Congress from doing its duty and trying to overthrow the presidential election, which is essentially what these people were doing, egged on by Trump, who wanted to stay in office after losing. I can't believe that's a sentence I have to utter about something that happened in this country that some of my fellow Americans took part in, but it is. It's what they did, and it is a real threat that continues to our freedom. And look, I'm not naive. I know these threats exist, but I take great comfort knowing that the vast majority of people in this country, from both parties, everywhere in between, I don't think they want our government to fail. I don't think they want democracy to fail. Now, that's not a foregone conclusion that it'll succeed, but I think a lot more people are committed to it than the other way, and that gives me some hope here.
Yeah, I keep asking the question, and I wish someone would ask, the tough guys like Jim Jordan and Mark Wayne Mullen, the people who are out there saying that it was just like any other day. If that were the case, why were they hiding? Why weren't they out amongst their people, saying, hey, maybe don't, do that on the floor. Maybe don't.
Yeah, look, I mean, you talk to, I wasn't yet in the Congress, but I've talked to plenty of colleagues who lived through it. There is no doubt in their minds what those folks were willing to do, what they did do. I mean, you can see the footage yourself. Some of these officers get just the absolute crap kicked out of them. These people were willing to use violence and kill to accomplish their mission. And I think there are still folks committed to trying to overthrow this government. But again, I think there are a lot more of us who are willing to defend it.
Chris, I appreciate you taking some time for us. As always, good stuff. I hope you'll come back and share some more, and especially as this goes on down the road. It's my hope that they block this and we find a U.S. suitor to keep this a U.S. company and move forward. But I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Rick. Thanks for having me on.
Anytime. Pennsylvania Representative Chris Deluzio. Want to hear your thoughts? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break. Right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show.
I've been driving buses for 5 years, and my day-to-day routine is I wake up a little earlier than most people. I get on a bus, I go out, I pick up some students and make sure they get to school nice and safe. Here in Fairbanks, Alaska, that can be a challenge because of the winter weather and the icy roads. But I love the job. So the Teamsters are great. They provide us a lot of protections. They've always taken care of their people, made sure that our jobs were secure. We didn't have to worry about whether or not we'd have a job from day to day.
And that's amazing because before we'd be working 4, 6, 8 hours a day and only earning minimum wage was real difficult to make a living. Then the Teamsters pushed a law so we make something we can live off of and not have to have a second job. What absolutely gives me peace of mind. The union membership allows me to focus on this job without having to worry about whether or not my family is going to be taken care of. I'm Andrew Case, and I'm proud to be Teamsters Local 959.
So again, it's going to be interesting to see what the Biden administration does, because what they have said is they're the most pro-worker, pro-union administration in history, and this is, for me, one of those important moments. And as I've been saying, I think this administration is moving us in a direction that can be transformational. This idea of, and I would love to hear them articulate this more, the idea of domestic production from domestic consumption, that we make what we use, especially something as important as steel, that we have a national conversation about what it is that we think is in the national interest, what productive capacity we need to make sure that we hold on to. And dearly, because, again, coming out of the pandemic, I think we learned how fragile our supply chain is, and just how one disruption could cause chaos, and did cause chaos. We struggled to come out of this, and I think the Biden administration did a good job in getting us back on the right track. I think they're doing a great job of moving us toward a path of reshoring manufacturing. This, understand, while we're talking about investing in infrastructure, the roads and the bridges and the buildings and all of the green economy stuff that's going to be built, steel's going to be at the heart of this. Nippon didn't buy this because they're like, oh, hey, we just got a little money laying around. We think we're just going to do out of the goodness of our heart. No. They saw dollar signs. They saw American dollar signs. They saw American investment dollars. Shouldn't we take that investment and invest in American companies, in American workers? It's my thought. Want to hear yours? Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. If you're watching on Free Speech, thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you back here tomorrow. For our radio audience, quick break. Right back.